live scene. I just recognized I didn't do something. Let me make sure it updates. Okay, there we go. I was on the wrong screen. So yeah, it's something that's been on my mind for several months now, because there's clearly a shortage in black news and black media that is promoted and that is propagated and propped up to the extent that you see other media outlets get promoted and propagated and propped up. And the problem, honestly, isn't a lack of will, and it's not a lack of attempts. Okay, I mean, you have a handful of, I'm not gonna drop any names, but I mean, you have a handful of outlets out there that are black owned. But there are certain things that you notice compared to some of the white owned platforms, where there's clearly a disconnect going on between what you see from certain platforms and what you see from other platforms. And something that I think needs to be discussed is why this is essential. Why exactly is black media essential? Specifically, independent black media. The independent part, let me break that down first, because first and foremost, I think for black media to really truly be genuinely representative, and I'm talking about in terms of like issues and policies for the community, our independence is essential. We need black media without strings attached, so that when the time comes when certain things need to be said and certain things need to be spoken, we don't necessarily have to worry about, what some white financier is going to think about it. And some people might not think that would be an issue. In all cases, I think universally speaking, I don't think it's universally a problem, but in certain cases, it definitely can become an issue. If you're saying something that the people who are, paying your bills, essentially, if you're saying something that they don't necessarily like. And so our independence is tied to the truths that we want to tell. And we shouldn't have to worry about what other people think about us. Now, certainly with me, when it comes to black intellectual, I really, and this some people aren't gonna really, I don't want people to take this the wrong way, but I don't really make decisions based on the opinions of other people. I'm trying to word it in a way that's not where it doesn't seem like I'm attacking people. I don't make decisions based on acceptance. And I think that's, in terms of power, that's sort of what you would prefer. That's what you would want. I mean, in terms of power, you're not necessarily in a position of power if what you have to say is, you have to kind of get approved by other people first. But power, there's a trade-off. Do you go for complete independence and complete power and complete control if that means that you're going to miss out on exposure and you're going to miss out on financing? And it's not an easy discussion to have, because I don't really know that there is a complete right and wrong answer. People do what people feel they need to do. And, what people feel they need to do is not always with malicious intent. A lot of people are just looking at the cards that they've been dealt and looking at the options that they have at their disposal, and they're making decisions based off of that, for right or for wrong. But I think when it comes to black media, our independence has to be a priority. We have to have the ability to say what needs to be said when it needs to be said, regardless of if the state And this is the problem with the mainstream media. So when I'm talking about certain things and certain other groups of people, I'm referencing mostly a lot of mainstream people who you see the most, people you see on television, people you see who get propped up the most, like by and large. That's honestly where the biggest problems lie. I started a Facebook group. Let me actually pull it up. It's basically a thing. I'm calling it a think tank. It's not a literal think tank, but it's the idea, the conceptual idea is in the mode of a think tank. It's called Independent Black Think Tank, No More Colonizer Lives. And actually no, Independent Black Media Think Tank, No More Colonizer Lives. And if you go to Facebook and you look at the actual picture for the group, underneath the title, underneath the name of the group, it says for disruptive black thinkers. The independent black media, I have this vision, and because I think we need visionaries in the community, right? I think we need people who are willing to think outside of the box, and we definitely need people who, as we go into a new age, really, and as we are seeing this shift in generations, the millennial generation is coming of age right now. The average age of a millennial is 26. A lot of millennials have the right or have the ability to vote. So we have a lot of political power as a group, as millennials. We have a lot of economic power. We are a very large generation, the millennial generation. So we are going to be the generation that changes a lot of things. A lot of the assumptions of old. So when it comes to the independent black think tank and the independent black media, the independent black media think tank and independent black media in general, we have to begin to think of it in terms of conceptualizing new ideas and new theories about how to move our community forward. Using new technologies, burgeoning technologies that really are kind of still in their infancy. And I kind of mentioned this in the article, and I'm about to read the article or parts of the article in a second. I'm just kind of finding my footing for this stream, because I didn't really do a lot of pre-show preparation for the stream, because I already kind of knew what I wanted to talk about, and it was already an article that I already had out there, so there wasn't a whole lot of research that I had to do necessarily for this stream. So I'm kind of just still kind of finding my footing, but I think we need to look to how we can harness new technologies and leapfrog the old systems and use new technologies to really propel our agenda forward and really prop up our community and move our community forward. And I think independent black media is foundational to that. Honestly, in my opinion, and I even say this in the article, I don't even think we're in a position where it's an option whether or not the independent black media is an option at this point. When you look at all of the lies that are perpetuated about our people across the spectrum, okay, when you look at some of the things that are said about us online, some of the arguments that people make and some of the arguments that people use to legitimize attacks against us, we're in a situation where propaganda is so widespread that to not have an independent media cooperative or independent black media association or group, to not have that is to basically concede to everything that's said about us. And it's not just fighting back against the propaganda against our community. It's also about putting ideas out there that you aren't really going to see echoed in the mainstream media. Because quite frankly, when it comes to the mainstream media, and when it comes to even some black media outlets that with huge followings and they have a lot of reach and things like that. There's a shortage of, how can I say, like, there's a shortage of radical ideas, and look. Some people kind of feel funny about this, but I've said this repeatedly in previous videos. I consider myself a radical from the point of view of understanding that moderation and incrementalism is not going to save us. There are entirely too many systems that are broken, including the media system, or and depending on how you look at it, it's either broken or it was designed to function this way. Regardless of how you look at it, it's not working for us. And because of that, we have to take matters into our own hands. So I've been politicking for about 15 minutes now. Let me actually get to the article. And as I said before, you can find this article on blackandintellectual.com. The title of the article is Why Independent Black Media is Essential and Disruptive. And a lot of people are talking about this right now. People are going to be talking about this a lot in the future. This is a discussion that has been going on for several years now, and it continues because no one has really cracked this egg yet. No one has really figured out how to do this effectively. You have had attempts, and I have my website, but my website is small. Black and Intellectual is small, and I don't have a problem with that. I go to my website every day just loving to be there. You know what I'm saying? Like right now, I just like the feedback that I'm getting. I just like writing, and I know that a lot of the stuff that I write, and this is another problem, a lot of the stuff that I write would never be posted in a lot of mainstream, even some blackish kind of platforms. And so Black and Intellectual is necessary purely for no other reason than, well, one of the reasons is just to allow my ideas to really flow and to get my ideas out there into the stream of intellectual thought. And if other people, this is a call out to other people who might be listening to this. If you have an idea about an article that you want to write and you know it's going to be really radical and really kind of possibly a little controversial, as long as you're not, advocating for something crazy, hit me up, send me a message on Facebook or Twitter, and I will get it posted on my website, on my blog, because I want my platform to be used for other people to be able to use my platform as well. It's not just for me. But at the beginning of the article, I say words matter. People like to pretend that they don't, but they do. Words matter a lot. They're used to define narratives and set standards, tell stories, whether they be true or false, and explain concepts and ideas. News and current events, when compiled together, tells a story to get you to think a certain way about the topics at hand. This is why the media is so essential. When we talk about media, what are we talking about? We are talking about a collection of thoughts, and we're talking about a collection of ideas through different mediums. Okay? Whether you're talking about print, whether you're talking about online, whether you're talking about mass media, there are different types of media, right? We all know this. And when you combine these different types of mediums, you have a media. And it's basically just a collection of people doing the same thing or talking about a lot of the same ideas. But when you get a lot of these people, when you have a media that is dominated by a particular group of people, what you will find is that media, that collection of ideas and the collection of thoughts, will reflect the sort of common sense, for the lack of a better term, or the mainstream. That's the term a lot of other people use. It'll reflect that mainstream ideology of the people who control that media. Okay, so that doesn't always benefit people from disadvantaged communities who don't have really their foot in the door. And if you want to get your foot in the door, this goes back to what I was saying at the beginning of this video. If you want to get your foot in the door, you often find that you have to play by a certain rule. You have to say certain things. You can't be too radical. You can't be too black. And yeah, I'm not one of these people who fault people for taking certain jobs or now, unless you're being like a lobbyist or something, that's something different. But people have to put food on the table. You know what I'm saying? So sometimes I think people are a little too critical of people who go into certain lines of work. But at some point in time, you have to understand that what you're doing is not necessarily benefiting the group of people that you are actually a part of. And the black media is essential to all of this, because the black media is essentially independent black media, means that we tell our stories the way we think they should be told. One of the biggest problems black people have faced since we've been in this country is a narrative that gets promoted in the media all the time, especially in the past, that is deeply antagonistic towards our community. Okay, so we didn't, for all throughout slavery, even after slavery, we've struggled to control the narrative told about our people. The narrative that gets told defines how people think about you. It defines how the world looks at you and looks at your community. So when you have a media that is controlled by a bunch of capitalistic plutocrats who have a lot of resentment for people of color, especially black people, how do you think the people around the world are going to view your community when it's people from outside of the community defining your entire existence? That's a problem. Okay, so continuing. When it comes to the black community, how we are described and depicted has always been tightly controlled by people from outside of the community. I just said that. In response to this narrative controlled by white society, black people were forced to develop their own ways to tell their own stories. Historically, however, it was easy to ignore black stories, ideas, concepts, and beliefs. White-owned publications had more readers and more capital to invest in their platforms. This is essential. Even if you look during and after slavery, when you had the handful of black publications that were out there, most of the time they didn't last very long. They lasted for maybe a few years. A lot of those old newspapers and stuff like that, a lot of those publications became defunct after a while. Number one, during slavery, a lot of black people couldn't read. It could actually be not necessarily lynched, but could be whipped if they were caught reading or trying to read. So throughout slavery, there wasn't even really a market for black media like that. And even after slavery, this is where you start to see the black media kind of come into its own, especially towards the end of the 1800s. And it's around that time when you start to see people try to control black media. I'm gonna get to that down in a second because I'm getting ahead of myself. But yeah, so white-owned publications have more readers because they largely have more capital and they have the ability to invest in their platforms in ways that black people, by and large, just don't have the ability to do that. And that's a hindrance, that's a limitation. But I'm gonna expand on that later on in the article. So continuing, things are changing now. Things have been changing for a few years. The advent of the internet and social media provides black people with more power to craft their own narrative than at any point in U.S. history. That is so true. I think we gloss over, not necessarily because we want to, but just because there's so much going on. We forget how important the internet is and how important social media, which is a product of the internet, how disruptive social media has been. social media, along with the internet, honestly, but social media has been highly disruptive. I'm gonna get into, well, first, since I'm gonna use that word disruptive a lot, let me go ahead and define what that means now. In the article, I do that kind of in the middle of the article, but when I say disruptive, I'm talking about a technology or an innovation. Okay, something that has been created, something that has been engineered, something that has been thought up, that conflicts with and comes into combat with, not necessarily violently, but it conflicts with something that was created originally, that was used to solve a certain problem in the past, but something else is created, something else is innovated in the future that comes along that either does a better job or finds a new way of doing something that disrupts entire industries that came before it. So we're talking about new markets that are created. We're talking about new value systems that are created that contradict and compete with old markets and old value systems. So after the end of slavery, okay, so you have to understand something. During slavery, there was no market for black media. Like I said a second ago, because we weren't allowed to read. We weren't allowed to really think for ourselves. When slavery ended and black people started learning how to read, an entire new market opened up. Okay, for a lot of black intellectuals who could now market to the black community. And you saw people do this in droves, actually. And so there's a subsection of the article that I wrote where I talk about just a few historic black newspapers. Some of them you guys have already heard of in the past. Some of them you might not. But there were a lot of these newspapers that I just did. I wasn't going to list every single one. But understand that there were a ton of these newspapers. And like I said, a lot of these newspapers just went out of business after a while. But this became a huge market. And so the first owned and operated black newspaper in the United States was called the Freedmen's Journal. Now, this was a journal which was meant to appeal to free blacks. So this was actually during slavery. A lot of the early black newspapers in the 19th century were part of the abolitionist movement, and thereby began the trend of black thought through written word being associated with the uplifting of the community. Okay, so a common trend that you've seen within black media, honestly, since the end of slavery, well, honestly, since the time of slavery, is this appeal to freedom. It's how black media historically has been used to call attention to things that were happening in our community that other white publications either didn't talk about, or when they did talk about it, it was either indifferent or it was supportive. So continuing, there was also the North Star. Now, a lot of people have heard about the North Star. It was created by Frederick Douglass in 1847 to advocate against slavery. 2 years earlier, in 1845, the Anti-Slavery Bugle was founded in Ohio and was often shared on the Underground Railroad among its participants. So a lot of these newspapers were read by whites, a lot of white liberals during the time, a lot of free black people in the North who might have had the ability to read. So this was the market, basically free black people and white liberals. Okay, who were white abolitionists, who supported and financially supported some of this stuff. But even that, like, the market was too small. Clearly, like, even that didn't keep a lot of these newspapers and a lot of these publications afloat. So continuing, most black people were prevented from learning to read and write, and they were blocked from a decent wage. There was no such thing as a paid slave. If you're a slave, you're not getting paid for it, or else you wouldn't be a slave. Not for anti-slavery newspapers, that's for sure. So no wage and no education meant no ability for these black-owned newspapers to survive very long. After slavery, as more and more people, more and more black people learned to read and write, many more publications would spring up. Publications such as the Afro-American, which actually still exists, by the way. It's now called the Baltimore Afro-American, which began in Baltimore, Maryland, my home city, in 1892, and promoted unity in the local black community and challenged racial discrimination. There's that trend again, that common theme of challenging racism, something that has always been an aspect of black media. Black media today, I would say, is a lot more diverse in our topics, and that's a good thing. I don't think that's a bad thing, but that need to talk about what's going on in our community, that's not going anywhere. And that's why black media is so disruptive, as I will, explain later on. By 1919, the Associated Negro Press was established in Chicago, Illinois. The A&P would play a major role during the era of segregation in circulating news stories to the black community by black writers and black authors. Black newspapers and black magazines Black newspapers and magazines provided a source of context in a world that defined black issues through non-black and often anti-black lenses. From 1919, when the A&P was founded, to 1964, when it went bankrupt, there's the common thread again of black media going out of business because of money. That's been a problem for so long. It was not uncommon for white newspapers to publicize and advertise lynchings. They also apologized for the murder of black people I'm not talking about white newspapers, apologized for the murder of black people by ravenous mobs of random white men. We all know this, and I'm not saying all white newspapers and publications did this. A lot of them didn't do it. Okay, but you did have the existence of newspapers and periodicals during the era of lynching that would advertise lynchings. They would, and it boggles my mind how this wasn't used as evidence against these people. I mean, obviously they're publicizing the lynching in the newspaper, so obviously people at the newspaper were in on it. But we all know this. Nobody 99.9% of the time was ever brought to justice. Or 100% of the time, I probably just should say that, for lynching black people. Okay. They also, let me see, I read that already. Not unlike today, where we see modern versions of this same activity where black death is legitimized by apologists for the state. So understand what's going on right now. We try to make it seem like we've made all this progress. We try to make it seem like, the stuff that goes on in America today is not like what went on in the past, and that's actually not true. Even though newspapers today might not be celebrating Black Death, they definitely apologize for it from time to time, depending on which newspaper you're reading, and some of them completely apologize for it. So how is that really all that different from white-owned publications in the 1920s doing the same thing regarding lynching? There's not that big of a difference. And again, this is why black media is essential. Okay, because we can't expect even well-intentioned people, we can't expect people to tell our story the way we would tell our story. And we damn sure can't expect them to speak the way that we speak, when quite frankly, they're not the ones being attacked. Black media has always had to fight against anti-black assumptions and norms in American society. This is why independent black media is essential, and will continue to be until we live in a society where anti-blackness isn't accepted as normal. So, independent black media is disruptive. So I explained what disruptive meant a little while ago. You're basically, when something is disruptive, you're supplanting an established norm. That's like the easiest way to describe it. There are more complex ways of describing it, but that's the easiest sort of bare bones way of describing disruption. You are challenging established norms through technology and innovation. Black media at the end of slavery became disruptive because you went from having essentially all white domination of the flow of information to now the flow of information being having to be shared. Okay, so now you had black people who had the ability to have their own newspapers and have their own periodicals, and this became a problem because black people were saying very radical things back then, just the way that we say very radical things today, and people had a problem with this. So from the very beginning, black media was disruptive as long as it remained independent and original. It was disruptive because it created a new market for black information that existed outside of the control of white America. Okay, if you have a publication that you control and nobody can really tell you what to write, nobody can tell you what to say, and you can disseminate your information and disseminate your knowledge to the masses, to a particular market of people that you are appealing to, that can cause problems if what you're saying is not accepted by society. Okay, black media has always had a value system that held concepts of state violence and anti-blackness to a different standard than your typical white-owned publication. This clearly became a problem for some after the end of slavery and the Civil War around the turn of the 20th century. There were many regions in the United States back then where black people could be assaulted simply for reading the wrong newspaper or periodical. Black media caused a disruption in the all-white flow of information. And so that's why black media is disruptive, and quite frankly, that hasn't changed. Okay, so understand what because of this disruption, understand what has happened in response. So something had to be done. This is what I wrote in the article. Something had to be done. So around the turn of the 20th century, you began to see a new trend. That was the funding of black media by liberal. I said liberal in the article, but I use that in quotations. It more so like philanthropists, white benefactors, people such as J.D. Rockefeller and Andrew Carnegie, and they weren't the only ones. Okay, basically you had a lot of people in the money class, well-to-do white folks, who saw the potential to make a lot of money, and they began bankrolling black intellectuals during the time, like Booker T. Washington. But he wasn't the only one either. Like a lot of people started taking money because, again, it goes back to what I was saying at the very beginning of this video. It has everything to do with exposure and financing. Okay, if you can't finance yourself, you have to look for financing elsewhere. And a lot of times you're going to be going outside of the community. And that's what people did back then, and that's what people do today. It's this conundrum that we find ourselves in. And continuing with the article, they undoubtedly also saw the ability to control the narrative in the black community. See, that's the trade-off. So a cultural mindset was developed around what was called by some the Tuskegee machine. That's what Du Bois called it, because Du Bois butted heads with a lot of these people. I linked to another article that I wrote back in 2016. It was a very long article, which is why it shows up on the first page of the Google search engine for a particular keyword, because it's so daggone long. And I used a lot of pictures. But basically, the Tuskegee machine was a group of like-minded black people within the black media in the early 20th century. And some people call these people the bourgeoisie. I don't. You can call them that if you want to, but they were basically a group of black media figures and media platforms that were basically taking their cues from Booker T. Washington and the Tuskegee machine. Basically, it was basically a collection of it was a mindset, really. where everybody kind of got on the same page about how to talk about certain issues. And even though I have yet to come across firm links where, you know, Carnegie or Rockefeller was literally telling Booker T. Washington, hey, don't print this, or don't get these black people to write that. I haven't found that per se, but I find it mighty strange that when these people were getting money from outside of the community, all of a sudden certain radical ideas were not supported, which is why W.E.B. Du Bois didn't like these people. He butted heads with Booker T. Washington and some of these other publications because of what he saw. Now, Du Bois didn't really have room to talk, quite frankly, because he ended up taking money from white folks too. So again, it's that conundrum, right? And so I continue in the article, and I said we ended up with thought leaders who may or may not have been held back from making certain arguments. This is why I stress the independent part of the black media. Okay, we don't just need a black media. And honestly, you can say that we've had that already for a while now, quite frankly. I stress independent black media. I stress that. Okay, that independent part is very critical. Herein lies the truth. Black media, when it is untamed and uncontrollable and highly Herein lies the truth. Black media, when it is untamed and uncontrollable, is highly disruptive and always has been. It provides opposing arguments against injustices that are not always politically correct or supported by the state. I alluded to that earlier. Not to say that you can't have pro-black ideas if you get money from outside of the community. I don't believe that. I don't necessarily believe getting money from outside of the community means that you can't be pro-black. I think you can do both. But it's a matter of how far you actually are allowed to go. Okay, so however, there is always that threat of being told by the moneyed interest that what you're saying is, quote, too radical or too black. That if you don't change your tone, they'll pull your funding and support for your platform. This reality hangs over the heads of many kind of black enough platforms. Okay, so independent black media is not monolithic. We don't only talk about state violence and oppression. Black media is a very eclectic, very layered, very original, very trendy thing, and even more so when we're independent. So all black people do not think alike. There are political disagreements. God knows there are political disagreements. There are economic disagreements. There are a lot of economic disagreements. Differences in style and approach, generational shifts in thought and perceptions of the world. We are complex and we are layered. Oftentimes, the appearance of being monolithic gives the perception that to some that we all think the same way. So a lot of times black people think black people think the same way because a lot of times we say a lot of the same things. Because we're trendy. We are naturally trendy people. But that doesn't mean we all think the same way. Just because we have words that we like to say, and we have phrases that we like to say, and just because we all talk about like I said, there is a common theme of a lot of people in the black media, independent or not, a lot of people in the black media talking about oppression against black people. People think just because they see some of these things that we all think the same way and we all think we're monolithic. No, we are not. Okay, black people, sometimes, as a matter of fact, sometimes we are too combative with each other. And I think to an extent that kind of holds back progress in and of itself. But I didn't really write that in the article, so let me just continue. You have black socialists. I consider myself a democratic socialist, but we do live in a capitalistic society, unfortunately. You have black socialists, you have black capitalists, you have black futurists, also known as Afrofuturists. You have black pessimists, you have black liberals, black progressives, black conservatives. There's a lot of political disagreements and economic disagreements between black progressives, black socialists, and black conservatives. These are people who are not on the same page on a lot of issues. Black Christians and black Muslims. black atheists and agnostics, black people who are straight, black people who are gay and lesbian, and everything in between. You have black immigrants and black native-born Americans. You have black veterans, black activists, black feminists, black womenists, black nerds or blurs. You have black people who just don't give a damn. Okay? You have black people with college degrees and black people who don't have college degrees. You have black workers and black entrepreneurs. We are a very large community. And all of these black people have different experiences and life stories that impact the way they view the world. When their works are combined, okay, when you combine the mass media and the blogs and even to an extent social media, because social media is a form of media, that's why it's called social media. All of these things combined represent the black media, or what could perhaps become the black media, because I don't know how much of a media you can really call it, especially because we're kind of independent if you look at social media, but social media is not necessarily, I don't really think it's as focused as it needs to be. When I say independent black media, I'm talking about something that's more focused. I'm talking about something that is more, where people are more on the same page, where there's a difference of ideas. We're not regurgitating the same talking points, but we kind of have an understanding with each other. Even if we don't necessarily agree with each other, I think that there needs to be a communication, just like with white media corporations. They have times when they all kind of come together, like that. What is it called? The press secretary dinner, or every year they have that little dinner where the president comes out and makes jokes and people crack on the president, and you have all of these media figures there, and they're all kind of rubbing elbows with each other and laughing and getting along and being cozy and stuff like that. And that's just one example. Like, they have groups, media groups, and things where there's some coordination. That's why you look at the mainstream media and they all talk about the same damn stuff. You turn on CNN, they're talking about Russia. You turn on MSNBC, they're talking about Russia. You talk on, Fox News does its own thing, because we all know that Fox News is just straight up propaganda. Okay, but they all kind of talk about the same stuff. That tells you right there that there's collusion between the media outlets. Okay, and I'm not saying there needs to be collusion within the black media to that extent. Okay, but there should be a focused, there should be an agenda. Okay, and a very broad agenda, not something where it limits creativity. But this is something like, this article is a think piece that needs to be expanded upon. One day I want to write a white paper. I've been thinking about doing this for a long time. I want to write a very long, like almost like something you would do in graduate school, like this really long white paper, just breaking down all of the ways that I see these strategies being implemented. Some of the different tactics that we can use, some of the things that need to be done. I do think there needs to be a think tank, like an actual legitimate think tank, where we sort of coordinate our ideas, whether it's through the Facebook group that I created or another group. First and foremost, we need a way to communicate with each other and break bread. Once we get enough people on board who are of like mind, we begin figuring out how we're actually going to implement this. But let me continue, because like I said, this article is one article of many, because I've actually written another article that I want to actually bring up now. Well, not bring up now. I don't want to go off on another topic. Let me finish with this article before bringing up another one. So, all of these voices have something to add to the discussion. Though one may disagree with something said from one or more of these groups, just about all of these groups have groups of bloggers and thinkers who write, some more consistently than others, about the things that impact their group within the larger context of the black community. The common thread, the through line, if you will, has not changed. Modern day thinkers in the black community still overwhelmingly talk about the issues that impact us. Social media and the internet have simply given, or let me say it like this: social media and the internet have simply given Black writers, thinkers, and intellectuals the ability to communicate on a mass scale for a fraction of the cost compared to that of traditional mass media or television. So we can do everything the media does. Honestly, we can do the same thing that CNN does. We can do the same thing that MSNBC does at a fraction of the cost. Okay, that's very powerful, and that's why all of this stuff is disruptive. So some of the limitations, let's start talking about that. So there are major resistance levels when it comes to exposure for Black media and Black news. And again, I'm stressing independent Black media and Black news. Traffic nowadays isn't cheap, and I'm talking about internet traffic. Traffic isn't cheap, and access to strong search engine data comes at a high price. A good SEO strategy means more exposure and rankings for keywords that you might be able to compete for. More exposure means even more, or more exposure means more organic backlinks. So because a lot of people who don't know this, a lot of people who don't actually have a website, you need backlinks are like the juice that gives credibility to your website. The more backlinks you have, the more Google views your site as having more authority. Because according to Google's algorithm, your content is being linked to more. So because if it's being linked to more, that means a lot of people like it and a lot of people agree with it. So that means you have more authority. That brings exposure. But in order to do this, you need a very strong SEO strategy. And a lot of these SEO platforms, and I use one in particular. These SEO companies they charge an arm and a leg for their data, because data is king. If you have access to data, search engine data, especially like for Google, okay, that's money essentially. That's literally money. Okay, and a lot of these SEO companies know this, so they're charging hundreds of dollars. Well, not hundreds, but a lot of times it's like 100 per month. Or if you want to go the yearly route or the annual route, you're going to be paying over $1,000 just to get access to data. Okay, so this isn't cheap for a lot of people, and that's an issue for a lot of people in the Black media. A lot of people who might have really good ideas who lack that exposure because there's just certain moves that they can't make, and this is widespread within a lot of Black spaces that I notice. This is very widespread. There's not just the issue of online exposure, but what about the on-the-ground reporters and citizen journalists? So what if there was a story, and because I was thinking about this, how many Black outlets do you see that actually send reporters to certain communities in certain areas when there's a story that needs to be told? This is something else in terms about the independent Black media. We also need investigative journalists. Okay, we need Black investigative journalists who will go to areas around the country and really investigate stories that are being underreported or not reported at all. But of course, that costs money. It's going to cost money to fly people around the country. It's going to cost money for room and board. There are other hidden costs involved that goes into just telling a thorough story. Okay, one can see how the bill increases exponentially, and I haven't even touched on marketing costs. I haven't even gone into marketing. Okay, so marketing is a whole different beast. Like, marketing is crazy. So a major limitation of Black media is the lack of financing and capital. The disruptive nature of Black people telling Black stories means we have to find ways to fund ourselves and each other. This is why it's so easy for outsiders to come in and control the narrative by controlling the flow of capital. This puts a stranglehold on content creation because it becomes less about telling the unapologetic truth and more about making sure the money keeps flowing. There appears to be a ceiling that must be broken, a ceiling that must be shattered, a barrier that blocks most truly independent members of the decentralized black media. Without the breaking of this barrier, black media and black news will struggle to survive. Okay, decentralized black media. What do I mean by that? I haven't used that word yet. Media right now, there is a centralized black media, and a lot of times these are people you see the most. Okay, decentralized black media is more in line of what you see online. Okay, it's people who are doing their own thing and they're building their own systems and completely independent from higher ups and completely independent from centralized corporate structures. Okay, that's where I believe things are going in the future. The millennial generation is going to be the generation that pushes decentralization forward, and we're going to push the decentralized society forward, and I truly believe that. But it's, there are a lot of growing pains. So the future of black media, where are we going? There's potential everywhere. Okay, but it is not as easy to capitalize off of this potential as people may think. There is a paradigm shift. There's a paradigm shift that is long overdue in the community. Okay, we have to begin to see ourselves as being part of a shared economy, a shared community. In many ways, we already are. You have people talking about the shared community, but I'm talking about this on a different scale completely. And let me talk about that. Let me bring up that article. I'm not going to read it, but there's an article that I wrote on my blog, blackandintellectual.com. It is entitled, and I actually made a video about this as well that you can find on my YouTube channel. Let me find it. Where are we at? Yes, the title of the article, and I love this article. I really like this article, and I need to write more crypto articles. But yes, it's a cryptocurrency article. It's titled "Beyond Bitcoin: The Cryptocurrency Boom Opens a Door for Black America." Just read the article. That's all I ask you to do. Read the article and watch the video that I made about the article. Because I really break down where I think we have to kind of go in the future. So we're talking about the lack of financing and the lack of capital, right? And we're talking about preferring, ideally, to not get that capital from outside of the community because of everything that I've already mentioned in this in this video for the past hour or so that I've been talking. How long have I been talking? Yeah, I'm coming up on 56 minutes. So I'm about to end this stream in a second. But I just want to say this when I talk about the future of black media and where I think we need to go. Independent black media, where we are going, this is just based on my research. This is based on what I'm seeing. This is based on where I think technology is going and our ability to harness technology. Our desperate need to harness technology for the future. Okay, we are moving towards a reality that we are probably going to have to engineer our own economy. Okay, we're going to have to create our own economy in the form of a token system. And a token system, I'm not actually, if you want to read what a token system is, I go into that in the article, the Beyond Bitcoin article. Okay, read that article because that goes too much into cryptocurrencies and that goes too much into blockchain technology and stuff like that. So I'm gonna be adding another 10-20 minutes to the video if I start going into that. But it's based on, I have this vision, right? And I have this vision of people within the community getting together, forming, you know, this think tank, forming this collaboration of ideas, this collaboration of thinkers and thought leaders. And once we get together enough people and we start promoting this idea across social media, and we start promoting this idea in the real world, even not just on social media, this idea of Black people creating our own economy and our own economic system based on blockchain technology, and using that economic system. Again, this is going to require a lot of people. We're going to need more than 100 people, right? It's going to require this. Honestly, this is going to require thousands of people. Okay, to really get this off the ground, we're probably even talking about hundreds of thousands. We're not talking about a small group of people. I'm talking about I'm not talking about all Black people either, because all Black people aren't going to get on board. But we're talking about a fraction of people in the community, okay, who are on the same page, and it's a large enough fraction, and we basically have our own community structure, and we use this token system, we use this economy that we create to fund projects like the Black media. That's sort of I keep forgetting the independent part, because I guess independent Black media is too much of a mouthful. But yeah, funding the independent Black media. This is a working idea. And that's why I said I'm really kind of thinking about getting a white paper together. I'm not going to put a date on it because I haven't even started, and I'm still conceptualizing a lot of this stuff. So I don't really want to go into too much detail about I'm over here dropping stuff. I don't want to go into too much detail about this idea because it needs to be fleshed out first. And this is something that is probably, for all intents and purposes, years away from really coming into fruition. But we have white people in the crypto space, in the blockchain space. You have people who are starting startups. You have people who are launching startups all the time, you know, and we have to have that. We have to be visionaries about this, and we have to look at how the current systems of doing things in terms of finding finance and finding capital. Yes, we can still do that stuff. We can still use traditional means of accumulating capital to do what we need to do, but we need to be thinking about the future as well. And we need to position our community, and we need to position the independent Black media in a way that puts us into a position of power in the future, and puts our children into positions of power in the future. So just chew on that. I really love talking about this. I love the people who have given me positive feedback. You know, this is it's a wonderful feeling knowing that there are people of like mind who know what you're trying to do, and they're thinking along the same wavelength, and that's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing when people can come together and just break bread and share ideas and not be disruptive towards each other, not be divisive towards each other, because there's too much of that going on. Why do my phone keeps buzzing? Come on, man. So yeah, so this is be on the lookout. This is incredible. This article, Black and Intellectual, we are growing. I like the way that this blog is growing. I'm getting some people on board now who are helping me out with it, so I'm not doing everything myself. And this is just a wonderful thing. And I'm a builder. Before I end the video, I want to say this. I'm a builder. Okay, I'm not a divider. I'm not a pessimist. Okay, I am something of a futurist. Okay, it's not necessary. Even on my website, like, I have a quote from Socrates of all people. At the bottom of my website, in the footer section, it says, "The secret of change is to focus all of your energy not on fighting the old, but on building the new." Okay, when I came across that quote, I was like, I gotta put that on my website. Because as much as I talk about white supremacy, as much as I talk about racism and the things facing our community, because we need to talk about that stuff, we also need to talk about the future. We need to talk about where we're going and how we're going to progress. It's not always about what happened in the past. No, understand, I love history. I minored in history in college. It's okay, so this is not a knock on history. History is very important because history teaches you a lot, okay, about how people act and how people react. Okay, but we can't only be focused on history, and we can't only be focused on the present. We have to figure out where we're going. We have to figure out where our community is going to be 50 years from now, 100 years from now. And where's technology going to be 50 years from now and 100 years from now? And how can we position ourselves and our community to harness that technology that's still being created. Technology, like, you guys will not believe how many documentaries, like tech documentaries, and like just complete nerd stuff that I watch, like blockchain technology videos, and I'm so wrapped up in technology. When I'm not talking about politics, and when I'm not looking at politics, I'm talking about, I'm researching technology. I don't write about technology a lot, and I don't talk about it a lot because I'm still in my growing phase. So that's not really something I'm too comfortable with talking about just right now, just yet. But yeah, like, technology is very important, and we have to be futurist. We have to grow. We have to go somewhere. Okay, the black community, for all intents and purposes, missed out on the first two industrial revolutions. We weren't really allowed to fully participate in the first industrial revolution and the second industrial revolution. We're in a position now with new technology, okay, to position ourselves to harness the new industrial revolution that's coming, and that's right around the corner. Okay, so a lot of people say, well, how are we going to do this? Again, I have my ideas, I have my solutions. Before I really talk about that, though, there are certain things that I need to do on my end. Before I really talk about, okay, we're going to do X, Y, and Z, this is how we're going to do it. Okay, I'm learning, I'm growing, and I have things that I'm doing on my end that when I'm done with my training and when I'm done with my education, okay, we're gonna be doing some great things on Black and Intellectual. Like, I have some ideas about what I want to do with Black and Intellectual that's gonna blow people's minds. Right? I have ideas in terms of how to use technology that's gonna be really revolutionary and truly radical and truly disruptive. Okay, I don't call myself Disruptive Blackness on Twitter for no reason. Like, I might not talk about a lot of this stuff. I'm kind of talking about it in piecemeal fashion as time goes on. But like, if people knew like some of the stuff that I want to create and some of the stuff that I want to engineer, people would be like, Brian, that's not possible. People would be like, you can't do that. How are you going to do that? Again, I'm building. I'm growing in my knowledge. I'm expanding my horizons. Okay, so just follow me on Twitter @_BlackIntellect. Follow my blog www.blackandintellectual.com. Follow me on YouTube. Join my Facebook group, Independent Black Media Think Tank. And let us build. Let us grow together. Let us educate each other. Let us learn new things and learn new ways of doing things. Okay, I'm an optimist. I'm not a pessimist. I believe we are only limited. I honestly, I don't believe we're limited by white supremacy. I really don't. I talk about white supremacy a lot, and in many ways, we are held back. Our community is held back by white supremacy. But I'm not going to sit here and lead people on and make people think that white supremacy is somehow gonna hurt our community too much to where we can't grow. No, there's a lot that we can do. There's a whole lot that we can do. Okay, economically, there's a lot that we can do. Technology-wise, there's a lot that we can do. We're just, I don't think we're as organized as we need to be. Okay, but we're getting there and we're getting organized. And I know there are a lot of people who are listening who want to do the same thing, or at least they at least understand where I'm coming from. So that's all I wanted to say. That is episode 16. It has been a great day. I hope it's been a great day for me. I hope it's a great day for you as well. So stay alive, stay proud, and I will see you guys on Monday. Peace.